my name is Sheldon Franken. I work as an elementary school counselor, and I also run a little organization called Inquiry Adventures, which I created about 10 years ago with the idea of promoting games and activities for the purpose of encouraging and engaging our students, our parents, our communities in social and emotional learning. And so this workshop, as Holly mentioned, is going to be more of a PlayNote than a Keynote. And what I loved about summer camp were the type of activities that you engaged in that really helped you build self-awareness and social awareness, which are two key pieces of social emotional learning. I always had it in the back of the mind, how can we incorporate the things we do at summer camp into our classrooms more often? Because I think they can have a very profound effect on our students' ability to build things like community and trust and self-awareness. So experiential education is not a new idea, but somehow it gets lost once in a while. And it's up to us to kind of bring it back. So this is the Cole model of experiential education. And sort of Cole called experiential education this idea of serious play. So I actually thought that would be a better name for my company, would be Serious Play, but it's taken. But I think it's a really good idea. And the idea here is that we have to have a concrete experience in order to reflect. Once we have the experience, then we're able to do some sort of reflection. And after the reflection, we kind of have an opportunity to think about it, and how does that apply to me? And then once I figured how does it apply to me or my community, what am I going to do about it? I'm going to go and actively experiment it, which then changes the next time I do that experience. If you think about it, even as simple as a soccer game, I have the ball and I'm running down the field with it, and all of a sudden I shoot the ball and I missed the net. And I realized after I missed the net that there was actually somebody wide open next to me. And so maybe I might think about it, reflect on, you know what, maybe I need to look at the whole field as I'm dribbling the soccer ball. So you know what I'm going to do? The next time I have the soccer ball and I'm dribbling towards the net, I'm going to pass the soccer ball. And the next time that I go on the field, that's exactly what I do. And that's the process of reflection and action with an experiential education. So if everybody can engage me, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to put down whatever you have in your hand for a second and just stand up. A little bit more complex. We're just going to play, starting with a very simple game of Simon Says. Great. Simon says, touch your hands. Simon says, again, touch your toes. Simon says, turn around. Okay. Simon says, touch your tummy. Simon says, spin around. Simon says, jump up and down. Simon says, move to the right. Simon says, go back. Simon says, come back towards the start. And ask. All right. In order to be successful at the complicated version of Simon Says, what kind of strategies do you think some people employ? Maybe you have a suggestion? Or did anybody purposely not look at it? And sometimes if we're not sure what to do, actually the best people to get information from is not the instructor or the leader or the person who's in charge. Sometimes the best people to figure out what to do are the people around you. So maybe the next time you have a challenge on a math problem or a social studies problem, then maybe there are people around you that might actually be able to help you. And maybe you can use that to move forward to encourage using our classroom and each other to learn from, which is at the heart of cooperative learning and one of the reasons we probably chose to attend this conference. So we've just gone from a what, we played Simon Says, to a so what. Well, I realized that I didn't have to follow the leader, and to a now what, well, maybe I can learn that I can actually get some good information and some good ideas from my classmates. Social emotional learning is just not about mindfulness. That it has 5 core concepts. It has self-awareness, self-regulation or self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. And if you're familiar with the Minds Up curriculum, you know that Minds Up is about what? Self-regulation or self-management and a little bit of self-awareness. But it's not necessarily a responsible decision-making, although a little bit, but it's definitely not a relationship skills program. So there's lots of components in social emotional learning besides self-regulation that a lot of us might get stuck thinking about. I was at a workshop years ago where I was doing some stuff with the Burnaby School District. and one of the administrators asked me, what does this have to do with mental health? How does this help kids with mental health issues? And I kind of thought about that, and my response was, social emotional learning is sort of the precursor to making sure that we have good mental health within our schools. I think by building self-awareness and social awareness, we become more familiar of the triggers that might set us on a course where we might develop some poor mental health practices, or maybe notice them within a social situation. So I think if we want to have good mental health in our schools, one of the best places to start is through social and emotional learning. And what we know, even about mental health, is that when we have social connections, when we feel included in a group, it can have a very positive effect on our mental health. Even somebody who's suffering from a mental illness, it's having social connections and being involved in our community can be just as effective as other things like exercise, diet, and even medication. So creating an environment within our classrooms that promotes social emotional learning is actually not only a precursor or a preventative measure, it can actually be a form of treatment for kids who are going through some mental health issues. And then we move into cooperative learning. So I took this little slide here and I put how cooperative learning fits both within social emotional learning and within the BC curriculum. And you can see, when we talk about the curriculum, communication, cultural identity, social responsibility, those are all key components of cooperative learning. And if you look at the Cooperative Learning's website or their handbook, those are all things that we would want to be practicing and teaching our kids in cooperative learning. And if you look at social emotional learning, things like responsible decision making, social awareness, relationship skills are also key components of cooperative learning. So I think one of the best ways to ensure that we have these social connections, knowing that they're key components of social emotional learning, knowing that social interactions is an experiential education method, and knowing that they're essential in cooperative learning, is we need to practice these kind of things in our classrooms. And I have this little slide here where the teacher says, why in the world do they call this cooperative learning? And all the kids are screaming. And so cooperative learning is not just putting kids into groups and saying, go at it. There has to be some teaching involved. Things like practicing how to take turns. I don't care if you're in grade 12 or kindergarten. These are things we need to practice. These are things that my wife who works in Metro Vancouver gets speakers in and they still talk about how to take turns. They might not call it that, but that's essentially what people are talking about. Listening to other people's opinions and thoughts. Having a non-competitive environment. Participating in a group does not mean that everybody has to be an equal participant. It just needs to be fair. That's a big concept for a lot of kids to understand. Why one person might not have the skill set to contribute as much as somebody else, but they're still a fair participant within the group. And that but even regardless of who does what work, success is shared across the group and across the classroom. So these are skills that have to be taught. They don't come intrinsically. And so I'm hoping especially when we get into the games, that we'll leave here really seeing our classrooms as teams that we want to mold, where everybody has an individual role for the greater good of the classroom. Whether you've seen a thumb ball or not before, thumb balls, first of all, if you ever want to make your own, instead of getting a pre-made one, you can often find blank kind of ones in dollar stores, and you grab a Sharpie, and you can use it as an assessment tool after a social studies assignment. Just put questions on there and see how much your class knows, math problems, etc., etc. But from a social emotional learning perspective, and normally I would open this up to the group to talk about, but I noticed that people were actively listening to one another. And when somebody had a turn for their thumb ball, I noticed a lot of people were waiting for the response before they shared their own opinion. And I can guarantee you this, when you play it with students, they will not do those things. Not everyone, right? They might shout out what they would say even though they don't have the thumb ball. And so those ideas of cooperative learning in terms of taking turns and active listening to each other, is the thumb ball, regardless of its content, can be a really effective tool to notice what worked and what didn't work as we were passing the thumb ball. And maybe you stop the game because it's not working, and what can we do differently so that it can work? And you can build a lot of great cooperative learning structures by using something as simple as a thumb ball. The other thing I love about thumb balls, or any kind of tool like them, is the engagement. Because I told you we're going to play a game on personal strengths, which is one of the topics of one of the thumb balls. I think you might have a lot of kids roll their eyes to the back of their head. But if you say we're playing, especially with elementary school kids, and even with some grade 8, grade 9 kids, if you're playing with the students, you say we're going to play with a thumb ball, all of a sudden, boom, they all want to participate, and they want that thumb ball. So it's just a tool. You're not teaching any new information. You're just using it as a tool to help with self-regulation and engagement. So we still have to find a way to make sure that we're all being included despite whatever barriers they might have. From a social emotional learning perspective, that could be the mood somebody comes in the morning. That could be your own mood as a teacher. A positive, negative, it could be a variety of different things. But just understand that being successful doesn't just mean keeping the ball in the air. It also means how can we ensure that everybody feels included and has a role, maybe a different role, maybe they don't get it as often, but still has a role in the activity. And so that could be a really nice discussion into what things can we do in our classroom to ensure that everybody feels that they're included.